Welcome to the Autism Dad podcast. I'm Rob Gorski. Got a great show for you guys today. I really appreciate you taking the time to tune in. This is part 2 of our 2-part series on navigating divorce with neurodivergent kids. Last week we talked a little bit about some common sense things, some basic things to kind of help with co-parenting when you have a neurodivergent kid. And this week we're going to answer some of your questions that you guys submitted. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience going through divorce and how it impacted me and things I wish I had done differently with my kids and stuff like that. So, Dr. Mikki Lee is back to finish off this conversation, and we're just going to kind of drop in where we left off. But I hope you guys find this helpful. And if you missed last week, just go back an episode and you can get caught up. So here we go. Okay, so there were, and so these are kind of a handful of questions that I've received from parents just over the years. And it just seems to be like the same questions that are asked over and over and over again. So I thought we would just touch on those before we close things out today. And I don't know if there's really an order for these. I guess we'll just start with the first one. So one of the obvious questions, I think, is like, how do you explain divorce to your autistic child in a way that they can understand?
Yeah, this is a tough question. And of course, as you said before, it really depends on the age of the child and where they are developmentally. But to use language that is calm, clear, concrete, developmentally appropriate, and also positive, or at least neutral, right? Like you're explaining what is happening to the child, because autistic children often struggle with the abstract concepts. So, not to use language like, mom and dad don't get along necessarily, to be more clear than that, right? Mom and dad will be living in different houses, but we both still love you and we both will take care of you. And this is what, this is the plan or something. And making it super clear what is happening. And of course, you need to leave room for reaction and emotional expression there. But the language really should just be calm, clear, and at their level, and allowing space for them to ask questions, for them to, show how they're feeling. And so that's the first thing I would say, like this specific language tailored to where they are developmentally. Keep the focus on stability, as we said before, which is like, these are the things that are going to change. These are the things that are going to stay the same, right? You will stay at the same school. You will, we'll still have like movie Fridays or taco Tuesdays. Like these are the things that are gonna remain the same. Mom or dad will tuck you in at night. It's not going to be someone different, just as an example. And if needed, if the child is really young, maybe use social stories, maybe use visual aids to help them understand and actually see in a story of like what is to come, like what is expected. And I guess lastly, allow for processing time. When you have this conversation, it might take more than one conversation. It might need to be revisited, and the child might need more time to absorb the information. They might ask repetitive questions. And it's important that when you share something like this with a child, to be patient and answer in the same consistent way, if that makes sense. Like, don't change up the answers, like stick to something that you both parents feel like is appropriate, and to just be patient.
Excuse me. I totally agree. And I think that can be hard because, not only is a kid going through something, but both parents are going through something, and, but I think if you have that unified front and we keep it as calm and reassuring and as matter of fact, and maybe don't over explain, you don't want to create questions that maybe they wouldn't have asked, before, because you tried to make it make sense. And then I mean, the only other thing I would think is uh, make sure that they know that it's not their fault.
Yeah, that's
Because I think,
huge. Yeah.
because like when my kids would have meltdowns, I mean, that was one of the reasons why they thought that their mom left, was because um, of the meltdowns, or because they were too difficult, or things like that. And it was like, I mean, how do you explain to get them to understand without explaining, right? And giving them that concrete knowledge so that they know, you know, um, it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to navigate. But I totally agree with everything that you said. Um,
Such a tough conversation to have, but I you brought up the word reassurance, and I think that's so important. Like reassuring the child, we love you. This is not anything that you did. This is not your fault, and we're gonna still take care of you, and just reassuring that how much you care and love your child, and that they didn't do anything wrong, right? They might need reassurance at different points, right?
mhm.
That you care, that you love them, that they didn't do anything wrong. And yeah, this is just such a tough conversation to have, and one that I would recommend, like writing down some points, like writing down some things that you both agree with, and keeping it short, clear, like not over talking. It's something that I think deserves some preparation time.
Thought needs to be thoughtful. The other thing that you can do too, um, in what I've done in the past, and maybe it feels like a cop out, but like our therapist's name is Patty, and we're just always like, Patty, we'll just, we have Patty on Wednesday. We'll sit down with the therapist, and we'll explain things, and the therapist is there to make sure that we're going down the right path, and they're there to show, to again reassure that, look, everything is going to feel upside down and scary, but it's going to be okay. Like, it's going to take some time, but it's going to be okay. And I think for me, it was reassuring because I felt less alone, and I felt like my kids had more support, and then I had more support, just trying to have these difficult conversations. But it's just another thing to think about if you guys are looking for um, maybe some outside of the box approaches to that. So the next two questions, actually, I think we can just combine into one. Um, when there's that transition from like one house to the other, there can be challenges with that. Maybe the kid doesn't want to go, or whatever. And the anticipation can create a lot of anxiety and all kinds of, regulatory challenges and disruptions and whatever. How can we as parents make that transition easier for them, while still like giving them the space, or holding that space for them to experience what they need to experience, um, without allowing them to sort of get stuck in that place, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be some struggles here when it comes to like all of the changes and the transitions that are happening. I think that there are some strategies that parents can definitely use to make this a little bit more smooth. It's still going to be tough, especially in the beginning, but the strategies that I'm thinking of that are proven to be helpful based on research is, one of them is priming. So preparing your child for, like, ahead of time what is to come. And this could be big picture, or this could be day to day. This could just be their weekly schedule, their daily schedule, where they're going. Like, they want to know where they're going to be sleeping. And, priming them for what lies ahead, I think, is really important here, to do as much as possible, especially in the beginning, as like everyone is adjusting, to give them some sense of predictability and routine. We've talked about consistency, predictability, stability, all those things, like, because it's truly so important, especially in the beginning. Um, and this is where you can like add the things that are going to remain the same. Like we're going to still have movie nights on Friday, but it might look a little different, right? So some routines can stay the same. Maybe as a family or in this new chapter, we want to create new routines and new
Hmm.
traditions, right? Like that's okay too. We're in a new house. Like what do we want to do on Friday nights together here? It's I think like leaving some space, like or allowing the child to choose. I want to keep this. I want to hold on to this, or let's create something new together. Um, so that's an idea. Um, Also like transitional items, like comfort items that they could take from one house to the other, depending on their age, if that's helpful. And another important thing is having doubles. So if there's an important, like a favorite pair of pajamas or a favorite toy or something, like maybe you need two, maybe you need one in each house. And that makes the child feel secure and like they would just benefit from knowing that that's going to be there no matter where they are, no matter where they're sleeping. Um, and another thing about this transition, like I think parents can also create like a goodbye routine. Like, okay, this is what we do together before you leave, and then the other parent can have like a welcome routine. Like I think you can be really creative. You can think outside the box what works. Like just like a bedtime routine. You have dinner, you take a bath, you read a book, and then it's bedtime. Like children thrive off of those. And so if you can think of one that works for your family to help with the transition, especially in the beginning, I think that you should 100% do it. And that's like also where a therapist can come really handy to help you. There's no one size fits all here.
Well, and I think, well, just to build off of what you said real fast, like that sort of exit strategy and then that reentry strategy, instead of having these like sharp cutoffs where everything changes at 4 p.m. on Sunday, there is it like tapers everything down, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
things start to become more and more similar to what they're going to be going back to or going over to. And then when they make that transition, it's a blip instead of this canyon that they have to try and adjust to. And then you build up from that. And so it just sort of, I think maybe adds some like continuity to it where it's just less abrupt, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that like every child or every family is gonna you might try something and it won't work, right? I think every family is gonna have some sort of routine that works for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it might take some adjusting or whatever, but maybe on Sundays, like the child likes to do this with their dad before they get into the car and like go to mom's house. It's like an activity that lets them know that okay, our time together is ending, and this is what we're going to do together, and then we're going to move on and go to mom's house. And so having something like that where it's not just like okay, gotta go, like get in the car, that can continuity, as you said, could be super helpful. Um, and let's see, is there anything else I didn't talk about? I think our language is so important here. Like the way that we talk about the co-parent in front of the child,
I was going to say that. Yeah.
is so important. Like um, that we need to really emphasize that child's relationship with the other parent is separate from your own. So even if you're experiencing conflict or disagreement, that should not come between the child and the other parent. Like they
Mm-hmm.
need that healthy relationship with them too. And so, when you do argue, when you do have a disagreement, to do it separately on your own time, not in front of the child, not weaponize the child or use them as a messenger. Like that really can cause stress on them. And the more respectful and kind you are to each other, especially when you talk about the other person, that also helps the child feel secure, right? Like, okay, I'm saying, mom and dad, like, there's nothing for me to worry about. in addition to what's already happening, because no one is openly arguing in front of a child.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, um, expressing that you are happy that they get to spend time with the other parent, right? Like it doesn't, I mean, am I going to miss you? Yes. Am I sad because you're not going to be here? Sure. But I'm also so happy that you get to spend time with your dad, because I know what it's like to miss you, and I know that your dad or your mom, they really miss you. And, I'm going to do my own stuff while you go and do this, and you're going to have fun, and you can call me if you need to, like that kind of stuff. And just, build up that they're not like, because I think sometimes parents can get very emotional, and our kids are very intuitive without maybe understanding the context or the details of what's going on, but they know that you're upset. And so then it becomes like, well, when I leave, mom gets really sad. So then I don't want to leave. But then if I don't leave, then dad gets really sad. And then you feel like you have to pick sides, and, and you said something that, the relationship with the other parent is separate from the relationship between the two of them. And I think that it's separate and equally as important, and whatever happened between the co-parents, again, assuming that it's not safety, abuse, drugs, whatever, is between them, and that should have no impact, because I think too, I heard a lot too, that like kids will identify a lot of times with like the same sex parent. So like if you have a daughter and you're the dad and you're just bashing the mom all the time, they can identify, is like, well, if I'm part of mom and mom is this terrible whatever, then there must be something wrong with me too. Cause if, you know what I mean? Like our kids can go to places sometimes where, as someone with ADHD, I overthink everything, and our kids can do the same thing, and I mean, my youngest had suicidal ideations for years because of what he was going through in his head, over this stuff. And, it's not always obvious to us on the surface as parents because we're dealing with our own grief. But I just think it's, the amount of effort that we put in, swallow our pride, whatever. You don't have to like the other person outside of being their parent, but just, you're still a family. You're just not living together anymore, and I think letting kids understand that there are different types of families, and some families live together, some families don't, some families, whatever. And then that's okay. It's okay. It's a change and whatever, but we're all going to get through it together.
Yeah. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to get to that place of togetherness if you're bashing the other parent, right? If you're not on foundation, if you don't have a foundation that you can build off of, it's really hard to move forward. And any, like all of the strategies and the things that we talked about don't matter at that point if the parents aren't like kind and respectful and modeling good behavior for the child of like, yes, mom and dad may not be together anymore. We live in different homes now. We are just friends, but we are still a family. And, that just looks different than what it was before. And like, I love it. I love how you said it. We're still a family. Families just look different. And yeah. And so
They're like
prioritizing.
comfort words, right? It's
Yeah.
like just, there's like a safety.
You still belong. Like we all still belong here. You're not, just like floating, not being tethered to a family. Like divorce can feel unsettling. Like you don't have any ground. Like there's no grounding feeling there for children. It could just be like, wow, where do we go from here? And so, maintaining that family unit, even if it looks different, can be very grounding and can give the child, but also like the parents who are a team, a sense of security, that maintain that emotional security.
Yeah. Okay. it makes everything easier, because I know people who are co-parenting, in ways that, I mean, it's not equally distributed at all. I mean, they're carrying the lion's share of everything, but they have sucked it up. They have done what they had to do, even when it was unfair, in order to keep things civil and to keep things as smooth for the kids as possible. And I know how hard that is. I could see how hard it is, but the kids benefit from it. And when you need to call the other person, there's not that animosity. You can just call and be like, hey, I gotta go text his dad so that he knows to pick him up at school tomorrow. I mean, like, you can just raise the kids just from different places, So it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to navigate. And you won't do it perfectly.
No, and I think, just as a gentle reminder that, like, don't expect yourself to do it perfectly every time, right? Like, there are going to be moments where you don't do it perfectly, and that's the reality. And you have to give yourself a tiny bit of grace there, especially when you're doing it on your own in the moment. And it can feel like you're living minute by minute, as you said once, and it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to see the future. It's hard to imagine that this is not going to last forever, this moment.
Oh yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
You survived it.
Yeah. And, the last question that we had was about transitions, and we've etched that into people's brains over and over again already. So I think, one of the things that I think we could maybe end this on is, and then I just totally drew a blank. And it's just like off the whatever, but like, I envision this, like, my thought stream is like on this train, it's on this track. And as I'm preparing to say what I'm going to say, like, I can see it start to, like, derail, like, in my head. And then it just, like, it fades away to where it's like, I have no idea what I was going to say. Oh. All right.
You got it.
Got it. And I guess maybe we can kind of close it on this, and maybe, if there's a response to this and people want more advice, we can do another episode of specific things about different situations or whatever. But probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned, and I think I told you this before, was, I felt that I had to be this strong force for my kids when they were going through what they were going through, where I didn't want them to see me sad. I didn't want them to know that I was struggling, because I felt like that was destabilizing for them. When the reality was, they knew that anyways, but I would tell them that I was fine, because that's what we tell our kids when, it's adult stuff. And to them, I was lying to them the whole time, and what I should have done and what I learned, and my kids have had conversations with me about this afterwards, especially when I hit really bad periods of burnout. I should have allowed them to see me grieve and go through these things, because then I can use that as an opportunity to model how I'm going to go through it. So like, instead of saying, "Oh, I'm fine, guys, I'm just tired," but like, you know what? I'm really sad right now. You're right. You're absolutely right. I am heartbroken, or I'm sad, or I'm even a little bit scared, but that's okay. Right. We all feel that sometimes. And when I feel this way, I just give you guys a hug, or, we sit down and snuggle and watch a movie, or, what I mean? Like something like that. Like, this is what I do to deal with that, because I know that it's just a temporary thing, that I'm going to feel better and that it's going to be okay. Or I go and I work out when I'm feeling really anxious, because it helps me to burn off all of that negative energy. And then I can come back out of there feeling like I'm grounded, again, instead of just telling them everything was okay when it wasn't, because I think what they needed more was knowing that I was struggling too,
Mhm.
and that we were going through it together, instead of, I was okay and they were struggling. So again, it's sort of those counterintuitive things. Like, we feel like we have to protect our kids, but in hindsight, I think there are consequences to that sometimes, and developmentally appropriate stuff and all, whatever. But, you know, I think I think that it's okay for kids to know that we're sad and that we experience the emotional side of this, and also to see that we can heal and that we can cope and we can find ways of dealing with it. Or, I'm sad, I'm going to go, I'm going to go talk to my therapist. You know what I mean? Like, just model something so that they don't see you grieving endlessly, or they don't, I think there's like a confidence in that. It's just safer, and then they can maybe mimic that behavior in situations in their life, and more healthy deal with things.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, even if you're telling kids that you're fine, they pick up on the fact that you're not fine. Like, they pick up on the signs, they feel the energy, they can see that you're actually upset, and that could, yeah. And of course, it's not always the right time to, you know, to share that. Like, maybe you need to just keep it in the moment. But I think in general, allowing your child to see you sad is such a vulnerable thing to do. And I think that parents feel like it's not the right thing to do because they want to protect their child. But I love how you phrased it. It's sometimes they need to see that, because then they get to see how you deal with it, how you cope in healthy ways. Because we don't, that's not like taught to us in school. No one says, maybe nowadays, but I remember being in school, no one said, oh, this is how you handle difficult feelings. This is what you
Yeah.
do when you're sad. And so having, using this experience, which is very difficult, to help your child learn to cope with things that are tough in life. I think that's whether you do it now or later, or maybe you feel like you could have done it earlier, but you do it now, which is all that
Hmm.
matters. Um, Giving them that gift of, hey, this is like, it's okay to feel sad, and here are some things that you could do.
Yeah. And we're normalizing the feelings, right?
Hmm.
Like, it's especially with like men. I think there's that stigma attached to being emotional and showing signs, like it's a sign of weakness or whatever. And so, like, I want my kids to know that it's okay to feel whatever you feel. You know, we have no control over what we feel. There's people that have always pushed back and are like, well, I control my emotions all the time. It's like, you, I don't know how anybody can control their emotions 100% of the time in the moment that something happens and you just instinctively respond. I don't know that that's possible, but you do have control over how you choose to deal with those emotions and how you choose to move forward and what you choose to do as a result of feeling those things. Um, and I think that's more important than the fact that, um, we're sad or we're angry or we're, whatever. Like, that's just human stuff, and helping our kids know that there's a path to deal with these emotions, so that it's not, you're not just stuck in this place forever, and there's a path forward. Um, so I wish that I'd learned that lesson much sooner than what I had, but that would definitely be something I would have done differently probably the biggest thing I would have done differently if I could go back and do things again.
Hmm. But
But
you do it now.
yeah, and you guys can learn from my many, many mistakes, and I share those all the time. So, um, do you have anything that you wanted to, kind of end on, or a piece of advice, or just?
Ooh, piece of advice. That would
I
have
know,
been
right?
good. That would have
On
been
the
like
on the
real
spot.
good to think of. I mean, like you see how I try to prepare so much for things, and I try
I
to
know
be
you're so
organized.
organized, so organized.
I mean, not all the time, but when something is really important to me, I'm like, okay, focus. And yeah, I mean, I love what I do, so this kind of I do spend a lot of time on like preparing for
Hmm.
this type of stuff. But advice for families or parents, you know, I think most of us, especially parents, um, you know, don't show ourselves enough kindness and self-compassion throughout the process of parenting, and also divorce. And so, and you know, we spend a lot of time talking about self-care and making sure that you're in a place where um, you're the best possible version of yourself to the world or to your child or whatever it is. I think that um, I find myself always reminding my clients to show themselves some grace, show yourself some compassion. You know, if you can't do it perfect 100% of the time, maybe that's okay. And maybe you can allow yourself to make those, or, you know, accept those mistakes or those errors or whatever you want to call them, decisions, um, knowing that you're still, you know, you're still trying your best, you're still a good person, you're still doing the best for your child. And so maybe that's not the best advice. I think we had a lot of advice that, you know, in this conversation, but I think it really ties back to, you know, taking care of yourself means you can take care of others the best possible way. And I think modeling self-compassion and kindness to yourself is one of the greatest gifts you can do for your children.
Ooh, that's really good. And I know it was kind of like, you know, in the moment question, but I don't know that you could have prepared anything better than that. That was really good.
Oh, thank
And I
you.
think it was very genuine. And I think that's really good advice that can apply to so many people. And I can promise you someone's listening to this or watching this and they're like, I so needed to hear that. I needed
Oh,
to
good.
know that, like,
That's my hope, really. Yeah, that it's helpful to someone,
mm-hmm.
right? And I know that I've had days where I could have benefited from hearing something like that.
So that was really good. I really appreciate your time and your expertise and just sort of the genuine way that you talk about this stuff. You know, I think it's very reassuring for people, and you know, it frames things in a way that it just sends this, like, it's going to be okay. You know, might be tough. There might be things that we have to navigate, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a day where you look back on this and you're just like, look how far we've came. You know, there's there will come a day where you'll look back and you'll remember how you thought things were going to be versus where they are today. And it can feel like the world is ending and your snow globe is all like shook up and whatever, but that's not forever, you know, and taking care of ourselves helps us to better care for our kids. And, you know, all of the effort is worth it. So you guys are doing, like, I always tell you guys are doing an amazing job. Like, I know how hard this is. And, you know, the fact that you are, you know, still present and you're still engaged and you're still involved, even imperfectly, because none of us are perfect, but you don't quit and you don't give up and you're there for your kids no matter what. And, that is the sign of a good parent, whether you feel that way or not. You know, no one's perfect, but you are the perfect person to parent your kids.
I love that. Yeah, you're the perfect person to parent your kids. Something I say to parents often is like, you are the expert. I'm your child. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I can help guide you in some areas that you have questions, but like no one knows your child like you. And you know, hopefully, I think it's helpful, but I also hope that like that helps parents feel empowered in some way and during moments where they feel like they are not in control of anything.
Oh, it absolutely does. I think, and you could say that every single day and there'll be someone new who needed to hear it in that moment. Right. So I think that it's it's so important to empower the parents and to reassure them too, that it's going to be okay, and that
Right.
you're going through a very profound human experience and you're going to come out the other end of it. Life will be different. But if you'd asked me 10 years ago what my life would be like, I would have said my life was over, and you fast forward 10 years and we are just light years ahead of where we were. And life has improved in ways that I could not have possibly imagined. I know what it's like to be in a healthy relationship and meet someone who truly loves and accepts me for me and loves and accepts the kids for who they are without having to compromise on anything like that. And I would not have known what that was like, so we go through these things in order to prepare us to be ready for where we are going. I guess that's how I look at it. I had to go through a lot of stuff in order to be the person I needed to be to exist where I am today. And I feel very lucky that I'm existing where I am today. So
You have a good way with words. I feel like that was very
Oh,
eloquent.
thank you. Thank you. Well, I have a lot of words in my head all the time. And I'm like constantly trying to just, it's all the things that I wish that I had in the moment, that I really didn't. And, I try to be that person for other people, even if it's like one person at a time, right? You're still throwing that one starfish back into the ocean. You made a difference to that one person. There's still lots of other people to help. So, you write your book on, navigating this stuff, because there is, as we talked about, very few resources out there. But I will, as stuff pops up, I'll add it to the show notes in the blog post, so people can come back and find, maybe there's book recommendations or support groups or organizations that help parents navigate situations like this. So I'll continue to build on that so it can be a more evergreen resource for parents. But if someone wants to connect with you, how can they do that?
Sure. So you can find me I'm on several websites, but my own website, drmikkilee.com. I'm also on Instagram at dr.mikkilee. I don't know if the dot matters. But yes.
It does.
And
it does.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. So dr.mikkilee.
Yeah.
And also like a quick Google search. I work for a private practice in Manhattan. It's called Clarity Therapy NYC. It's a lovely place. I really enjoy working there, and that's where I do my in-person work. So just a quick Google search of my name and I'll come up for sure. And
Very cool.
I'd love to continue being a resource and providing value.
Well, you do, and I really appreciate it, as I'm sure everybody else does. It's a tough thing to talk about, but I think, we can't change or adjust or address things that we don't acknowledge or recognize are there, or, sometimes we just don't have the tools to know what to do. And I think this was a great place for people to start, or maybe they're like neck deep in it already and they just need that little reminder, in a non-threatening way. So maybe you send this to somebody who needs to be reminded. We're really nice and we're not judging anybody. So, we'll go with that. So I really appreciate it. And we will be in touch.
Thank you for having me.
Real quick before I let you go, I just wanted to say thank you for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. I'll have all the information for this week's episode in the show notes below so that you guys can just click and learn more about my guest or sponsors. And you can also find me at theautismdad.com, where you'll have all of my links where you can contact me if you're interested in being a guest on a show or sponsoring an episode, or just want to provide feedback or even show ideas. I love hearing from you guys, so feel free to do that. You guys have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you next week. See ya.